Hi, I'm Camilla Sumner. I'm a senior at PLU. I study English, Hispanic Studies, and Religion. And I studied abroad in Oslo, fall of 2019.
Beautiful. So I guess the starting question for all these interviews has been like, why did you choose the program that you did? So if you want to talk about why you chose Oslo.
Yeah, so in the fall of 2018, I studied abroad in Oaxaca, Mexico, and I actually got sick and had to fly back to the US for 3 weeks, and it kind of left me feeling like I wanted to do more and see more. So I decided to study abroad a second semester, and I had never been to Oslo. I had been to Europe as a young child, but I hadn't had a lot of experience there, and so I thought, might as well go back and see a new country and see what it's like.
That's a great reason.
Yeah, so the way I set up my schedule, your classes only met like 1 or 2 times a week. I think my classes only met once a week, if I remember correctly, and it was for 3 hours. And so I only had class Monday through Wednesday. So Thursday through Sunday, I would travel. And it was really nice to be able to have that amount of time to just go out and do things. The homework was also, the only thing graded was essays at the very end of the semester, and so it's kind of on you to keep up with the reading. But then also, because the essay is very independent on whatever you want to focus on, you write it on, you could kind of choose which topics to go more in depth with, and it was the academics were not set up the same as the US. There wasn't all these assignments to keep you
Busy.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, so.
You have a class that you took there that was really impactful for you?
Yeah, so my favorite, the 3 classes I took were all incredible. The professors had strengths in different areas. My favorite was my class on terrorism and counterterrorism with Hilda, because she, every class blew my mind. We would leave class and have to discuss it, me and my roommates, because it just you had to unpack it all. And just looking at terrorism from a different country's perspective. We talk about terrorism a lot in the US, but hearing it from the outside perspective, hearing about American terrorism from another perspective was super valuable and super interesting. Hilda is also an expert on terrorism in Norway, and I think American foreign policy. You'll have to double check that. But she knows her stuff. She was incredible in lectures. She was super helpful. We even had Thanksgiving at her house. So just all around an incredible person. But just my perspective on terrorism and what we define as terrorism changed, did a 180. So I thought that was really, really interesting.
It's always fun to have a class where you have to discuss it afterwards. I've had a few courses like that where I just had to go talk to my friends about it because there was so much information to unpack, or something I was just so extremely passionate about. What were the other 2 courses that I would just like to know? Yeah,
so I took Ethics of War and Peace with Henrik, and then I took, I'm totally going to space on this, International Political Thought with Chris White, and Ethics of War and Peace was super interesting. Henrik is also an incredible lecturer. He tells lectures and stories, and so you're just and class is 3 hours long, and you were enthralled the entire time. He just goes on, and you were at the edge of your seat listening to every word because of the way he speaks. And then Chris White is very provocative, and would say things, and we would have these really heated discussions, but they were also very productive and interesting. And so again, all 3 classes were very strong. I learned a lot, but also different styles.
It's glad to know that the education side of this program is really thorough and well designed. So that's glad to hear that the classes in this program are actually really intense and enjoyable. So most people that go in the Oslo program, I'm assuming, are global studies majors. They're doing Peace Corps prep or want to become I can't remember the big scholarship that you get when you get to go to Oslo. Is it the Peace Scholar?
Mm-hmm.
The Peace Scholar, there we go. What did you study there, with just your majors being in Hispanic Studies and English?
Yeah, so I, technically all the credits went to elective, none of the credits helped. I considered minoring in global studies. It was always an interest of mine, but I won't fully complete the minor. But I just wanted to learn more about kind of international affairs and this new area of study that I hadn't had a lot of experience with. And I must say, the classes, I mean, the professors are incredible. They are experts in their field, and as someone who didn't study the topic, I was able to still learn and still gain a lot from the classes without prior experience in the field.
Okay, that's really nice to know that you can come into this that's great of you that you came into that with just the idea of wanting to expand your knowledge, not actually trying to like complete a goal requirement to graduate faster. You also have to take a class called Norway, or don't have to, but did you take that course to kind of understand the culture a little bit better?
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily like a proper class of, I don't think we received any credit for it, but it was 4 hours spread across a couple weeks of just learning. We learned a little bit of Norwegian, we learned a little bit of history and culture, we learned kind of the social norms and the way to act in public, because it's very rigid in Norway. You can stand out as an American pretty easily if you don't know how to act. But they teach that, and like it's all covered. I mean, no one's going to get mad at you or anything, but they'll be like, oh, they're the Americans.
It's not like France where they'll call you like a dirty American if you apologize too many times.
No, but Norwegians are very introverted, and you kind of stay in your own bubble, and so if you like make small talk to a person next to you on the bus, like that's like, what are you doing? We don't do that.
So foreign.
And it's, everyone's just kind of, you have your space and you don't go into someone else's.
Yeah, I love it. So did you have any kind of oops, I'm an American experiences with that? Because I feel like that's a pretty rigid system to be tossed into. I have no experience in that. France to me was very almost similar to the cultural norms of America, except there was more love and kissing in public. But I could see that the rigidness of a Norwegian country could be a little hard for an American to get thrown into.
Yeah, I think as a group sometimes we were a little like, we would laugh in public or something and you'd get looked at. Especially the bus etiquette was like one thing that we went over a lot. I think the main thing, I would really try to blend in, and so like even I learned a couple words. So at the grocery store I could get all the way through the transaction without like saying any English, and so that they'd think I was Norwegian, which worked most of the time. I actually don't even remember the phrase of like, would you like a bag? But I had memorized the sound of that phrase, and so I just like knew how to answer. But then like they would ask you something else and I'd be like, like they caught me.
I'm American.
Yeah. So that was.
I love that that's a universal thing, because I remember going to the grocery store and just being like terrified that they were going to ask me something I didn't know how to do. Like in the beginning it was card or cash, and I had no idea what they were saying. I was just handed them money and hoped they knew that I was not from here. What is the bus etiquette, if you remember so much that it was so very formal?
Yeah. So you don't talk to anyone on the bus. And then you also don't sit next to anyone unless it's completely full. So you spread out as much as possible, and then you fill in those extra seats, which I feel like is similar to the US. It's just maybe mentioned more in Norwegian culture. But again, it's this whole idea of like respecting people's space, and it all comes out of respect, not this dislike for other people as much as like I have my own thing, you know. And they actually are very friendly and very helpful, and most Norwegians, at least in Oslo, spoke pretty much fluent English, and so the few times, like if you were ever lost or anything, you would easily be able to find help.
On the page for the Oslo, it says you get something called, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Bjorkness Buddy?
Oh, yeah.
And then you're supposed to meet them at the airport. Did you get one of those, and could you explain kind of what that is?
Yeah, so when we all flew out separately, but I think 3 of us arrived on the same day to the airport. There were 2 Bjorkness students who met us at the airport and took us from the airport to our apartment. They also helped us. We get a bag of like kitchenware from the school that we picked up. They helped us get a phone plan and a bus pass and kind of all of those little logistical things. Yeah, really, really nice to not have to figure all that out. So it was Solveig and Amanda were our buddies for the 5 of us. There's 5 of us, right? Yeah. And they were really great. We went out with them a couple times. We celebrated Amanda's birthday. It was good to have that kind of instant connection with someone on your first day in Oslo.
Okay. Then were they students of the university, or
Yeah.
how were they? So okay, they were just like upperclassmen compared to you, or
They were actually low. They were
just.
I think they may have been freshmen, to be honest. Yeah.
They were just students that wanted to help. The housing and how you were living inside Norway was an apartment building. Could you talk a little bit about how your everyday kind of housing situation worked?
Yeah, so we lived at a student, the Norwegian government had student housing throughout the city. And so we had like a student campus housing area, which students from any university in the city could live at. It wasn't just Bjorkness, there were all kinds of students. And it actually, international students had priority, and so there were mostly international students. It was subsidized by the government, so it was actually really cheap housing. And there was a huge waiting list for Norwegian students to get into these housing units. So we lived on the top floor, I think, or I can't remember, of this apartment building, and it was an entire floor. It was interesting because it was kind of set up like the dorms, where you each had your own room that had like a closet. Some of the housing units, each room had its own sink and fridge. Ours didn't, but it was just kind of the door, a long hallway, the rooms, a shared bathroom for 6 to 7 people, and then a shared kitchen for 6 to 7 people. There was no like living space, which was like not great but not terrible either, right? We had a kitchen table, and we would spend a lot of time just sitting around the table playing cards and talking and cooking together. But yeah, it was really nice because you had your own space, but then you had this communal space. They had it set up where you each had a number on your door, and that number coincided with a cabinet in the kitchen, so you knew where your like food storage was. There were the same number of shelves in the fridge, so you had your shelf. And they even had a cleaning schedule set up for us, so like all of that structure was already there. And you literally, like, depending on your room number, it told you what week you were in charge of cleaning the entire apartment. So it was very, very, very structured. But then, of course, like, you're the ones who are needing to enforce that, and so if that doesn't work for you and your other roommates, you can adjust.
Do you think that kind of structure is there to help students, like, get immersed into the culture, or do you think that structure is there because that's how the culture is set up, like that the very strict movement and like rigid spacing issues, I would assume is a better way to say it, or do you think that was just there to help students kind of get acclimated to living in this dormish apartment thing?
Yeah, I think I'd say a little bit of both. Like, I think I thrive under structure, and so I really liked it because it's organized like I am, and it was nice to not kind of have to figure these things out when you got there. That having that in place was really great. But I think that's just like Norwegian culture of being organized and having things set up equally and clear.
This was being in Oslo an impactful experience, just being outside of the education side of this program, but actually getting to see an active like live city, or being in the capital of a country is very important. It's like going to, I would assume, living in DC for a summer or something like that. So do you want to talk about what it was like to live in Oslo and see like even the what is it called, the Nobel Peace building? I can't remember. Nobel Peace Center is what it's called.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in a small town. Tacoma isn't a huge town, but so it was kind of my first time living in a big city. I loved it. It was, they have some of the best public transportation I've ever experienced. I mean, every single, there's your bus pass that like you bought monthly, covered the metro, it covered buses, it covered boats, it covered like all different kinds of transportation within the city, because there were little islands in the bay that you could take boats out to. Yeah, and then you could buy like pretty cheap extensions to go to the airport or to go to other towns, which was just great. And it was easy to follow. It was really hard to get lost in the city, because it was just so clear and organized, and things were on time, things were clean, and so that was kind of a difficult adjustment coming back, being so used to literally being able to go anywhere so easily, and then coming back to the U.S. where public transportation isn't great and you kind of need a car to get around, was frustrating to adjust back to.
For doing all this, is there anything you'd like to tell a student planning on coming this, or a story that you'd like to share with anybody that is thinking about doing the Oslo program?
Yeah, I think, so I did a lot of traveling throughout Europe while I was there. Like I think I went to 9 countries while I was during the semester, which was great, and I loved those experiences. I also wish I had traveled through Norway more, because it's a beautiful country. It's also very large and long, and so there is different climates. I wish I had gone camping. That was a big thing there. You can camp. I think the law is that you can camp for free anywhere that is not in someone's, like, it's not gated in and they're not growing food on it, I think is the law. So you can literally like set up camp anywhere. And it's also like you have to be respectful and clean and all of that. But like going to the north, you can see the northern lights at certain times of the year. I did go to Svalbard, which I would highly recommend. It's an island halfway between Norway and the North Pole, and it's the human population is smaller than the polar bear population on the island. I went in November and it was dark 24 hours a day for the 4 days we were there, which was a very surreal experience being in darkness for that long. It actually is kind of the reason why I'm applying for Fulbright in Greenland, because I thought the Arctic was so interesting and would love to go back and spend an entire year there and see the different seasons. I guess the 2 different seasons, but
100% day or 100% night.
Yeah. But that was it was so interesting. I mean, it's the most northern population in the world. So seeing, we went to the most northern church in the world and the most northern museum in the world, right? And all of these kind of things. I would highly recommend exploring Norway as much as there is interest in seeing more of Europe as well.
That's all I have today, so thank you so much for doing this. It's always a pleasure to have people talk about their study away programs, so thank you. That's all.
Okay.